My cat-sitting promise on a holiday is the reason I'm alive today. That's not an exaggeration. It's the cold, hard math of a night where every small decision, a favor, a stubborn errand, clicked into place like a lock, and a predator almost turned the key. This all unfolded 2 Thanksgivings ago. The memory is indelible, burned in not by warmth or family, but by a deep bodily sickness and the profound silence of empty city streets. I was in the grip of a brutal respiratory virus, the kind that feels less like an illness and more like a possession. By the holiday itself, the fever had broken. I was technically no longer contagious, but the aftermath, that was its own special prison. My body was a collection of raw nerves and aching bones, constantly trembling with chills no blanket could touch. And the cough, a harsh, rattling, involuntary spasm that hijacked my diaphragm every few seconds. It stole my breath, my voice, and any semblance of strength. Speaking was a painful, rasping effort. Weeks before, in the land of the healthy, I'd made a promise. A friend and coworker was flying out to be with family. She had an older cat, a sweet, fragile thing that needed daily medication mixed into its food. Her apartment was a short walk from our workplace. Of course, I'd said easily. It was a simple favor. But now, in the hollowed-out version of myself, that short walk felt like a Himalayan trek. Yet backing out felt like a deeper failure. I'd said I would do it, so I would. Simultaneously, another thread was pulling at me. An old high school friend and I had been texting, reminiscing about tennis and bowling, sports we'd loved and abandoned to adult life. We'd made vague, hopeful plans to play. We should, we said, but my rackets and my trusty 13-pound bowling ball lived at my dad's house, a relic from a time when I had more space than a city dorm room. I was a carless college student, my world mapped by light rail lines and bus routes. A trip to my dad's was a quarterly expedition. Sickness had stranded me in the city for the holiday, a quiet, lonely Thanksgiving with leftovers and streaming services. But a stubborn, almost irrational determination took root. I needed to get my things. It felt crucial. If I didn't go today, the next opportunity might be months away. Our we should would fade again. So I concocted a plan, a complex logistical dance born of fever brain and desperation. I would take the light rail to a station that was a manageable walk from my dad's neighborhood. I'd text my brother to meet me there with my gear, no need to go all the way to the house. Then, on my return journey, I'd hop off at a different stop, catch a bus, and make the cat check detour before finally heading home. In my mind, it was efficient, a multitasker's masterpiece. The universe, of course, loves to mock such plans. The journey to get the gear was a blur of discomfort. The trains were ghostly, populated by a handful of souls who also had nowhere better to be. I felt every pair of eyes on my coughing form. But I succeeded. My brother, puzzled but obliging, met me with my tennis bag and the heavy, solid weight of my bowling ball in its case. "You're insane for doing this," he said, his breath fogging in the cold air. I just nodded, a coughing fit my only reply. Now came the second act. It was fully night, a deep November blackness that ate the light. I found my designated bus stop. It wasn't a cozy shelter, just a pole with a sign and a stretch of empty bench, lit by the sickly orange glow of a sodium vapor streetlight. This is where the world narrowed. This is where I became a perfect target. My phone's transit app became an instrument of torture. The digital screen promised one thing, reality another. Arriving 1 minute, it would chirp. I'd lean out, searching the deserted road for twin points of light. Nothing. I'd refresh. Next bus, 15 minutes. My heart would sink. Refresh again. Arriving 1 minute. This cruel loop continued for over 30 minutes. Time stretched and warped. Each minute was measured in coughs and chills. Let me paint the scene for you with the clarity of hindsight. It was after 9 p.m. on Thanksgiving. The commercial strip was dead. No shops open, no traffic, just the whisper of a distant highway and the brittle rustle of dead leaves skittering across pavement. And me, a 19-year-old woman, 5'3", drowning in a puffy winter coat. At my feet, a tennis bag, a bulky bowling ball case, and a plastic container of cold turkey and mashed potatoes. I was so visibly and audibly unwell, weak, burdened, alone. Vulnerability isn't just a feeling, it's a physical state, an aura that was broadcasting on every frequency. That's when the car arrived. It didn't speed by, it slowed. Then it pulled over, not at the bus stop, but a little ways past it. A nondescript sedan. The engine idled. I could see silhouettes inside, maybe 3 or 4 of them. The windows were up, but I could see their heads turning. Then laughter, loud and sharp, punctuated by words in a language I didn't understand. My already elevated guard went up another notch. Just someone being dropped off, I thought, willing it to be true. Just don't panic, it's a public stop. One door opened. A man unfolded himself from the back seat. He was tall, that was my first impression. The car didn't wait. It pulled away from the curb with a slight squeal of tires and disappeared down the dark road. The man stood there for a moment looking after it. Then he turned. The bus stop area was wide. There was a covered bench maybe 15 feet from me. I had positioned myself away from it, partly to have space for my things, partly to isolate my coughing spells. There was no reason for him to come near me. He walked directly towards me, not to the bench, to me. My internal alarm system, which had been pinging softly, now issued a low, sustained siren. He's just waiting. He doesn't want to sit on the cold bench. It's fine. I buried the fear under a mountain of rationalization. I glued my eyes to my phone's screen, to the lying digits of the bus arrival time. I leaned out again, scanning for headlights that refused to appear. I could feel his presence beside me, a solid, silent mass. The cough that racked my body felt like a betrayal, announcing my weakness. Minutes passed. Long, silent minutes where the only sounds were my ragged breathing, the occasional cough, and the distant city hum. Then, contact. A weight, heavy and deliberate. His arm, thick and solid, came down over my shoulders and around me, pulling me sideways into him. It wasn't a casual bump, it was an enclosure, a claim. My mind didn't go blank, it shattered into 1,000 glittering, useless pieces. Every thought, every plan, every bit of social scripting evaporated. My body's response was primal, absolute freeze, a deer in those exact headlights I'd been searching for. I stopped breathing, I stopped moving, I became an object in his grasp. After an eternity, probably 3 seconds, he mumbled. His voice was low, the words muffled and slurred. "You all right?" or something close to it. The sound of my own voice when it came was alien, a thin, reedy whisper stripped of all power. "I'm fine, just waiting for the bus." It was the automatic response of a polite person in an utterly impolite situation. A few more heartbeats, and the pressure released. He let go and settled back onto the bench, though still far too close. The relief was instant and immense, but short-lived. Because now, the rationalizations came flooding back, desperate to explain away the terror. "He heard you coughing. He was concerned. He's just awkward, trying to be friendly in a weird way. He saw you looking sick and panicky." I clung to these stupid, flimsy stories. They were the only life raft in a sea of panic. Why didn't I run? Why didn't I scream? People ask that later, from the safety of their couches. In that moment, the calculus was simple and terrifying. He was a giant, well over 6 feet tall, built solid, easily double my weight. He wore a dark bandana over the lower half of his face. This was late pandemic. Masks were still common, but this felt different. It hid him. And we were in a concrete vacuum. No buildings with open windows, no passing cars, no one within screaming distance, even if I could scream. Running with a bowling ball and a cough? He'd catch me in 10 strides. My only strategy, forged in that icy instant, was passivity. Don't provoke. Don't give a reason for the situation to escalate. Wait for the bus. The bus was salvation. But the bus was a lie. His arm returned. This time it was bolder, the same tight grip around my shoulders, but now his hand moved, slowly, stroking my back. I could feel the pressure through the thick down of my jacket. A wave of nausea rose in my throat, mingling with the urge to cough. I held both back, rigid, pretending to be a piece of furniture. My eyes were locked on the road, praying for light. And then, a glow, a distant fuzzy set of headlights rounding a far-off curve. It could be a car. It could be the bus. I dared to hope. As the vehicle drew closer, its distinctive shape became clear. The city bus. Salvation on wheels. The tension in my body didn't release. It coiled tighter. As it rumbled toward us, its brakes sighing, I made my move. I slid out from under his arm, the movement stiff and awkward. I mumbled toward the ground. "That's my bus." His response wasn't a goodbye. It was a low, confirming grunt, a sound that said, "I know." And then he stood up, towering beside me. The intention was crystal clear. He was coming too. The doors hissed open. A wall of warm, stale air hit me. I should have looked the driver in the eye. I should have said, "This man is harassing me." The words were there, in my mind, but they couldn't get past the brick wall in my raw throat. Fear had sealed it shut. I climbed the steps, my legs watery. I didn't head for a seat. I went straight to the vertical pole near the front and held on, my knuckles white. If I sat, he would sit next to me. This way I was upright. He, due to his size and the bus's layout, was funneled into a seat a few rows back. I could feel his gaze on the back of my neck. With the physical space between us, my frozen mind finally sparked. I fumbled my phone out. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely type. I texted a friend, the words chaotic jumble. A man followed me on bus, at my stop, scared, don't know what to do. Sending it felt both crucial and utterly futile. Calling 911 was out of the question. He would hear every whispered word. Did he have a knife? A gun? The thought paralyzed me anew. But another, more chilling thought surfaced. The car full of men who dropped him off. Where did they go? Were they part of this? Were they waiting somewhere, a second act to his first? This wasn't just a random creep. This felt coordinated, a hunt. I had to think. He would follow me off. That was a given now. I couldn't lead him to my friend's apartment. That was off the table. My mind raced over the bus route, a map flashing behind my eyes. And then I remembered. The stop before my intended one was for the large open-air shopping plaza where I worked. It was 9:30 p.m. All the retail stores were closed, their gates down, but the plaza itself had 24-hour security patrols and cameras everywhere. And more importantly, my restaurant co-workers would still be there, finishing the closing side work. The front doors were locked, but the back employee entrance, that was always open until the last person left. It was a two-door system. First, a gate into the fenced trash and storage enclosure. Then, a heavy metal door with a keypad. A sanctuary with two locks. It was my only play. As the bus approached the plaza stop, I moved to the rear door. He was instantly on his feet, a shadow detaching itself from the seat. The doors opened. I stepped down onto the cold asphalt. Within a second, his hand was on my shoulder again. This time, the grip was different. It wasn't an embrace. It was a clamp. Fingers digging in, holding me in place, controlling my movement. I had to take small, shuffling steps to avoid falling. He was steering me. The plaza gates were about 100 yards away. It felt like a mile. My heart was a frantic bird against my ribs. I couldn't run yet, not while he had this grip. If I broke away too soon, he'd overtake me long before I could get through both doors. I had to get closer. I had to endure this horrifying, intimate procession. We passed through the main gate into the desolate plaza walkway. My restaurant was in the far corner. The neon sign was dark. Everything was dark, save for the cold blue security lights. The silence was absolute, broken only by our footsteps and my pounding pulse. I was leading a predator to my workplace. The absurdity of it almost made me laugh, a hysterical bubble in my chest. We rounded the corner to the back service alley, and then I saw it. A miracle. The first door, the heavy gate into the trash enclosure, was propped open with a rubber wedge, and beyond it, the main employee entrance, the heavy metal door, was also wide open. Framed in the rectangle of warm yellow light were two of my coworkers, Marco, a line cook, and Jess, a server. They were just chatting, taking out the last bags of trash, their laughter a soft, normal sound in the abnormal night. Life, people, safety. His arm shifted slightly as he navigated the turn, his attention momentarily divided by the environment. It was now or never. I dropped the container of leftovers. It hit the ground with a plastic clatter. In the same motion, I threw my weight forward and down, twisting my shoulder with a desperate, wrenching motion. The tennis bag and bowling ball case swung wildly, hitting his leg. His fingers slipped. I was free. I didn't run. I lunged, stumbling, half falling forward through the open gate. I crashed into the enclosure, my voice finally breaking loose in a hoarse, broken scream whisper aimed at Jess. "He's following me! Close it! Now!" Her eyes went wide. She didn't ask a single question. She didn't hesitate. In one fluid motion, she grabbed the heavy metal door and threw her weight against it. Slam! The solid thunk of the lock engaging was the most beautiful sound I have ever heard. It was less than 2 seconds later that the handle began to jerk violently. Clang, clang, clang! Then a fist pounding on the metal. Boom, boom, boom. I was on the ground, gasping, coughing, tears streaming down my face. I had made it. By the width of a propped open door and the speed of a friend's trust, I had made it. For a moment, there was only the sound of my own choking sobs and the violent rhythmic banging on the other side of the door. Boom, boom, boom. Each impact vibrated through the concrete floor. Marco, the cook, was already on his phone, his voice low and urgent, calling mall security. Jess stood braced against the door, as if her slight frame could add to its strength, her face pale but determined. "Who is that?" she hissed, her eyes locked on mine. I tried to speak, but another coughing fit seized me, bending me double. When it passed, I forced the words out, each one a scrape of sandpaper. "Don't know. Bus stop. He followed me. Wouldn't let go." The banging stopped as suddenly as it had begun. A new, worse silence filled the space. We all froze, listening. Then the scuff of shoes on asphalt. He was moving. Cautiously, Jess peered out the narrow, wire-reinforced window in the door. "He's walking away," she whispered, toward the front of the plaza. We waited, huddled in the back hallway, the fluorescent lights humming overhead. The normalcy of the restaurant's back area, the smell of sanitizer, the stainless steel counters, the rack of clean aprons, felt surreal against the terror of the last 20 minutes. My body was beginning to shake uncontrollably, the delayed shock setting in. About 5 minutes later, 2 security officers arrived. They were calm, professional, their radios crackling with static. I told my story in fragments, between coughs and tremors. They took notes, their faces impassive. "Did he say what he wanted?" asked one. "No, just kept touching me, and then he followed me." "Did you see where he went?" Jess spoke up. "He walked around front. I lost sight of him." The officers exchanged a look. "We'll check the cameras and do a sweep," the older one said. "You should stay inside." As they left, Marco pointed silently out the front window of the darkened restaurant. Across the pedestrian walkway was an ice cream shop, also closed for the night, its interior dark except for the dim glow of a freezer light. And there, clearly visible, was the man. He was just standing inside the doorway, looking directly at our restaurant, a silent, patient silhouette in the glass. He wasn't running. He wasn't hiding. He was waiting, watching. Seeing him there, so brazen, so utterly unconcerned about being seen, sent a fresh icicle of fear through my heart. This wasn't a crime of opportunistic passion. This was purpose. The security officers saw him too. We watched as they approached the ice cream shop door. They spoke to him through the glass. We couldn't hear the words, but we saw his gestures, a shrug, an outstretched hand as if explaining something mundane. After a few minutes, he walked out with them. They didn't handcuff him, they just talked. Then he simply walked away, out of the plaza gates and into the night. One of the officers came back to us. "He says he was just worried about you," the officer reported, his tone neutral. "Said you looked sick and distressed, and he was trying to be a good Samaritan. Got carried away. He apologized." The words hung in the air, absurd and insulting. A good Samaritan who wraps his arm around a terrified stranger and follows her off a bus? A good Samaritan who pounds on a locked door after she flees? "I don't think that's what happened," I whispered, but the fight was draining out of me, replaced by a heavy, cold exhaustion. "We have his information from his ID," the officer said. "We have the footage. The company can pursue trespassing charges if they want, since he entered a closed retail space. For you, it's your call if you want to file a police report for harassment or unlawful restraint. It's a bit of a he said, she said, but the footage of him following you is pretty clear." The offer felt hollow. I was a sick, exhausted college student. The idea of navigating police reports, court dates, facing him again, it felt like a second, more protracted nightmare. I need to think," I said. The officer nodded, handed me a card with a case number, and left. The adrenaline was gone now, leaving a void of utter depletion. Jess looked at me. "You can't go check the cat, and you sure as hell can't take the bus home." She didn't ask. She just took my keys, got my friend's address from me, and drove me there herself. We went in together, a united front. The cat, oblivious, purred and rubbed against our legs as I mechanically dispensed its medicine. The normal, simple act of caring for this small creature in a quiet apartment was profoundly jarring. Then Jess drove me all the way back to my dorm, walking me to my door. "Text me when you're locked in," she said, and waited until she heard the deadbolt click. The next few days were a blur of physical recovery and a mental fog. I told a few close friends, my voice still raspy. Their reactions were a mix of horror, anger, and the inevitable frustrating question, "Why didn't you scream sooner?" I had no answer that satisfied them, or even myself. A week later, my manager pulled me aside before my shift. "Security forwarded the full report," he said, his voice uncharacteristically quiet. "They've got him on camera from the moment you entered the plaza. The whole thing. They've identified him. They asked if you want to press charges. They'd back you up." He looked at me, waiting. This was the moment, the chance for justice, for consequence. I thought of the man's calm explanation to the guards. I thought of the car that dropped him off. I thought of the chilling patience in his watch from across the plaza. If I pressed charges, my name would be on a document opposite his. He would know exactly who I was. "What did he say he was doing there?" I asked, deflecting. "To security, I mean." My manager shifted uncomfortably. "He stuck to the story. Said he was concerned. Said he thought you might need help getting home. Said he got confused when you ran." A good Samaritan. A misunderstanding. It was the perfect gaslighting defense. It made me look irrational, paranoid. In a courtroom with a halfway decent lawyer, who would a jury believe? The tall man expressing concern, or the hysterical, sick young woman who misinterpreted kindness? The fear that had gripped me at the bus stop was nothing compared to the cold, systemic fear that washed over me then. The fear of not being believed, the fear of the process, the fear of him knowing he had a name to attach to the face he hunted. I'm not sure, I finally said to my manager. Can I think about it? He nodded, patting my shoulder. Just let me know. He never brought it up again. I never followed up. The case number card got lost in a drawer. Life, in its relentless way, moved on. Classes, work, friends. The sharp edges of the memory began to soften, blurred by time and willful forgetting. I buried it, deep down in a mental lockbox labeled Things That Happened. It was the only way to function. But the lockbox wasn't sealed tight. It leaked in subtle ways. I became hyper-vigilant at bus stops, always positioning myself under a camera, near other people. I stopped wearing headphones at night. I developed a habit of texting my location when I was out late. The world had shifted, ever so slightly on its axis. The backdrop of assumed safety was gone, replaced by a permanent low-grade scan for threats. And then, just a few weeks ago, the lockbox burst open. A text message from the same friend. Hey, heading out of town for Thanksgiving again? Any chance you're around to check on Mittens? Same meds as last time. Last time. Those two words were a key. They twisted in the lock of that buried box, and it sprang open, flooding me with a sensory tsunami. The orange streetlight glow, the weight of the bowling ball, the feel of that heavy arm, the sound of the banging door, the silhouette in the ice cream shop, the crushing weight of his explanation. I sat there, staring at my phone, my heart racing as if it were happening all over again. I had to type my reply 3 times before my fingers stopped shaking. Sorry, actually going to be out of town myself this year. A lie. A necessary one. Some doors once closed should never be reopened. I never learned what that man truly wanted. The official story is one of misguided concern, but in the quiet hours of the night, I know. I feel it in my bones. His patience, his coordination with the car, his calm demeanor with security, it spoke of something practiced. I wasn't a random target of opportunity. I was selected, isolated, tested. And the only thing that stopped him wasn't my courage or my wit. It was a series of mundane miracles. A bus that finally came, a workplace with a back entrance, a door left ajar, and friends who acted without hesitation. Survival isn't about bravery. It's about the fragile chain of small things that break in your favor. The scariest stories aren't about monsters under the bed. They're about the men who look like men, standing in the light, waiting for you to be alone. That Thanksgiving night taught me that danger doesn't always roar. Sometimes it sits down quietly next to you and asks if you're all right. And the aftermath isn't about cathartic justice. It's often about living with the silence of unanswered questions and the permanent, quiet calibration of your own safety in a world that can look perfectly normal right up until the moment it isn't. If this story unsettled you, if it resonated with that quiet voice in the back of your own mind, do me a favor, like this video. That simple act lets me know these narratives matter. And if you want to explore more true stories that live in the gray area between shadow and doubt, stories that question the reality of the everyday, hit subscribe and follow Midnight Zephyr. Your support is what allows me to bring these haunting experiences into the light. Stay curious, but stay safe.